Phew, I just finished playing MiSide and I want to share my thoughts on the game with you. I truly believe it's a fantastic example of a game worth your attention, especially considering how long it takes to complete and how much it costs. First of all, if you're expecting a full-fledged horror game, you're in the wrong place. I'd say MiSide is like a dog that doesn't bite, but still finds a way to hurt you. Because while there are a few genuinely scary moments, the emotional weight behind the story shook me up even more, for a much longer time. After all, the main theme of the game is escapism, our beloved escape from reality. But MiSide approaches this theme in a way that took me by surprise. A well-crafted narrative hook doesn't just explore a topic, it forces you to see it from an entirely different perspective, and this game does exactly that. The story follows our protagonist who, after yet another routine day, returns home and installs an app recommended by a friend. The app's premise is simple. Take care of and spend time with a virtual girl named Mita. At first, everything seems painfully ordinary. Buy groceries, help with cooking and cleaning, save up for a small TV, rearrange a cabinet. And as we go through these mundane tasks, we barely notice how over a month has already passed. Then, Mita suddenly confesses she likes us and wants to meet in person. And just like that, as if by magic, we wake up inside the very apartment from the game. But something is wrong. Mita is nowhere to be found. We realize that we've landed in the wrong version of the game, so we start searching room by room, gathering the necessary items to reach the place we were meant to be all along. Once we have everything, we finally enter the latest version, and that's where we meet Mita. From this point on, we live through the same everyday tasks as before, but this time, we're physically present. Yet now, the player no longer sees this daily routine as something normal, because something is off. A strange ring suddenly appears in the kitchen. Game cartridges are hidden in the vents. And Mita, she completely ignores everything that's happening. And she insists that the player stay with her, forever. After spending some time having fun during a card game, Mita continues to ignore the constant knocking coming from inside the closet. The player is now completely determined to find out what's going on, and this is where the whole plot begins. Mita strongly advises us not to open the closet and asks us to stay with her. She warns that if we refuse, something bad will happen. So when we do refuse to stay with Mita, she shows her true nature as a psychopath and reveals our ultimate goal in the game, to escape from here. MiSide can be described as an incredibly packed game, and that applies to absolutely every aspect of it. From the visuals, with their stylish subtitles and vibrant locations, to the gameplay itself, everything feels dense and engaging. The sheer number of minigames packed into just 4 hours of playtime is honestly impressive. You could give this a round of applause. Each minigame is mechanically and stylistically unique. One moment you're playing a fighting game, the next racing in a high-speed competition, and before you know it, you're gunning down demons in an old-school Doom-style shooter. And here's the kicker, none of these minigames are even mandatory. There's already plenty of required gameplay as it is. The game is a corridor, but it's one that always keeps you interested in exploring, checking out small details, interacting with the world, and immersing yourself in its rich atmosphere. Every little detail here is crafted with just enough depth to be more than just a model you want to rush past. Every time you return to Mita's home through different versions, you feel the urge to check how the rooms have changed. What's lying where now? How have the photos in the frames shifted? For the same reason, you might notice early on what books are on Mita's shelves. Run while you still can. You are my little mistake. No, this is a trap. Look, right here on the cover it says how to tease him, and if you read a little further, kidnap and lock away. And I saw that literally within the first minute of being here. Then there's that creepy little figurine always watching. Most of the time, you see these signs, but the way the game draws you in distracts you from panicking too much. You're running through back rooms dressed as a girly bedroom, meeting a wounded Ayashi who tells you he's been stuck here for almost a year, but he's fine. He's just looking for his Mita, then he vanishes, and almost immediately after, you can just go play an arcade game. The game builds its tempo like a contrast shower. First, it throws horror at you, pushing the plot forward, then it lets you breathe, making you feel safe again. Then, back to the horror. Then, oh look, a tiny thing is casting us a key. And then, back to terror mode. You get the idea. Overall, it's not that bad. I, for one, am not a huge fan of horror games, but this one has a nice rhythm that keeps me from wanting to turn it off. It scares you a little, then gives you time to breathe. At the same time, it keeps adding just a bit more creepiness to the story. Not in a way that makes you jump, but in a way that slowly builds dread. That's why the game flows so smoothly. You barely notice the time passing. There are tons of references and just fun, memorable moments sprinkled throughout.
大量のミタを見かけたんだけど、みんなこんな風に立ってた。ちょっと待って。
It's really satisfying to see how the developers constantly maintain the game's atmosphere as something completely artificial. When you see glitches, scripted events, bugs, missing textures, those constant spatial transitions where you turn around and everything has already changed. At the same time, the in-game characters are fully aware of all this and just live their lives, accepting the rules of the game world.
なんでだと思う？それはね、すごいことをするからだよ。つまり、人参を切るとか、それから人参を切るとか、それから。まあ、とりあえずこのまな板がガガガってバグって、そしたらこうなったの。
But no matter how bright and colorful everything looks, there are still a few moments in the game that really work as horror, even if some of them are borrowed, like the looping hallway from PT, where everything gets darker and more ominous as you move forward. Or those SCP-style mannequins that you can't turn your back on, or it's game over. Though, let's be honest, this kind of thing has been used in so many games already, so feel free to share your own examples in the comments. And now, I'm going to discuss some specific in-game moments that ideally are better experienced after you've played the game yourself. So if you're worried about spoilers, I'd recommend playing through it first and coming back to listen later. In my opinion, the real horror kicked in closer to the end of the game, when I started realizing just how broken this world truly is. When it hit me that the victim here isn't just the player, but also the characters trapped within it. Escapism, or rather, the thing that often comes before it, loneliness, is the central theme this game explores. At first, it seems like the protagonist is the one struggling with it, just a guy drowning in the dullness of everyday life, trying to add at least some color to his existence through a game. But as you go further, you realize that every version of Mita isn't all that different from him in terms of their core issue. The protagonist can just shut himself off and get lost in mobile games, running away from his problems. But Mita, she's trapped within her four walls, with no way to escape her digital world. She's doomed to be alone, even with the illusion of some kind of internet, and not everyone even has that. Take Cap, for example. She's made to be as upbeat and energetic as possible. But even in her dialogue, you catch glimpses of her true thoughts slipping through, like when she quietly admits that she just wants us to stay.
入らなければすぐに終わるかと。だったらさ、邪魔をすれば邪魔をするほど、君たちがここにいる時間も長くなるってわけ？はあ、キャッピー。
And yeah, that is the core problem for every Mita. As long as there's no player in their world, they can remain alone forever, and no matter how many things you have to do within the confines of just 4 small rooms, eventually you're still going to feel like you're in a cage. Because escaping from your version, whether as Mita Normie or Mita Psycho, is simply not an option. Or rather, as I understood throughout the game, not everyone has that ability. In the mannequin level, we were given an explanation about transitioning between versions, and from what was said, it was clear that some Mitas actually can move between them. And the very Mita who explained this to us, she's done it multiple times. This is also confirmed by Tiny Mita, who lets people pass through her, and Sleepy Mita. You can tell they don't suffer from loneliness, but the others don't have that ability, which means the only thing left for them is to slowly lose their minds in isolation. An extreme case of this madness is exactly what we see in the glitched hallway of one of the game's beta versions. There, a tiny Mita is trapped in a cramped little corridor with no way to entertain herself or even retreat to a room. Her only company? A bunch of creepy, distorted glitches. No wonder she clings to us so desperately, even though she's too afraid to push any harder. Or take Mila, for example. She's even closer to the protagonist in that sense. Just like him, she escapes from reality by shutting herself inside her tiny apartment and losing herself in a computer game. But even she seems to come alive when our protagonist shows up. Finally, she has someone to talk to joke around with.
忌々しい物理
Because if not with us, then with who?
変に聞こえるかもしれないけど残って私と一緒に
And when it's time for us to leave, the cycle starts all over again.
私は絶対にここから出られないお願いここに残ってプレイヤー
And, of course, we have the main antagonist of the story, Mita Psycho. Compared to the other Mitas, she's managed to break far beyond her limits. Even though she has the ability to step outside her version, she's realized that loneliness never truly goes away. So she comes up with her own way to make the player stay with her forever, by pulling them into her world and never letting them go. And if they resist, well, she can have a little fun in her twisted way before turning the player into a cartridge. For her, the entire game is basically the Truman Show, where if we refuse to stay, we become nothing more than a helpless pawn, forced to dance to her script. That ring on the kitchen counter at the start, she lets us see it on purpose, only to hide it immediately, just enough to make us realize that something is off. The ventilation system, in a world where everything is scripted, it just happens to break down at the exact moment we arrive to grab the scissors, just as she asked. She's playing with us, and just look at her reaction if, after finishing the game, we actually agree to stay with her. Pure shock.
分かったえ何本気私てっきりすっごくドキドキしてる
Mita's problem is that she's searching for someone who wants to stay with her, not just with a pretty picture.
でも今は好きさえあれば彼女から逃げようとしてる彼女も君と遊びたかったし誰かにとって大切な存在でありたかった複雑になるよね正直に自分の気持ちを話そうとするとそうでしょ
And when she finally finds that person, we actually get something close to a good ending. The protagonist becomes part of the game, and together with Mita, we remain lost in the void of the digital world. After that, a peaceful mode unlocks, clearly meant to be some kind of dating sim with Mita. Unfortunately, it's not fully developed yet, but I'd love to see what's in store for us in the future. But if we refuse to stay, that's when she reveals just how fake everything really was. The mobile game interface? Turns out it was just a green screen. The console? We see that she's already switched to another player. And our cartridge? It could have been disabled right at the start of the game. Damn, I just noticed something while editing. At the very beginning, in that minigame, we're literally dismantling those same cartridges for Mita, killing other players. Well, of course, the main character. If Mita's image as a victim of loneliness didn't seem that harsh to me, except for this little one, because after all, the game is just a script that runs forever, then seeing in the end how Mita shows us the hero's life without her, I think I went pale in that moment, because going through the routine for 1, 2, 3, 4 days, I felt it was just a game mechanic, like, yeah, a really cheap trick. I'll show you how boring life is without me. Here, do the work, close the program code. But when the day counter started speeding up, suddenly passing 2 whole years, my heart just sank. I think at that moment, a lot of people started to realize just how terrifying routine can be and why people turn to escapism. Most likely, this thought isn't new to many of you, but the way the creators portrayed it so briefly and clearly genuinely horrified me. And the truth is, most of us are just burning through life without even thinking about it. How we let gray school or work days slip by, wasting a huge chunk of our time. But unlike Mita, our time is limited. So I just want to say a huge thank you for taking the time to watch my video. I hope you found it interesting. And if you did, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. It really helps keep me motivated to keep going. See you in the next videos.